What is going on, Clippers fans? Welcome to Season 2, Episode 76 of Clips and Dip. I am Chuck Mockler, usually joined by William Updike and Adam Oslin, but they are enjoying their off seasons, and I am remaining here to talk about the Clippers. Today, we have the wonderful, the fantastic, the effervescent Law Murray. He's a Clippers beat writer for The Athletic. If you're not familiar, he's also covering the Drew League, I believe, starting pretty soon, which I'm very excited for. We're going to talk Ty Lue. We're going to talk the young guys. We're going to talk the Clippers' lack of wiggle room. But before we get into that, Law, how you doing, man?
I feel a whole lot better after that intro, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's I'm excited for the Drew that starts Saturday, June 1st,
Mm-hmm.
and um, I'm just I'm ready for the all season. But man, these days don't need to be fast. Like we can take. I'm enjoying the planet we on right now.
Yeah, there we go. We were kind of talking about it before we streamed or before we started this. I think most Clippers fans are rooting for the Celtics in this NBA Finals. So we'll see. We'll see how that happens. I saw someone photoshopped the Mavericks logo to be the Lakers colors, and the Lakers fans are all Celtics fans now. So it's a very weird time for LA sports teams, I feel like.
Nah, the Lakers fans are Mavs fans.
Oh yeah, sorry, that's Mavs fans.
Yeah,
So yeah, then we are going Celtics then. I think most of Clipper Nation will be going Celtics on this one. We're not here to talk about the Mavs, thankfully, I guess, anymore. The biggest news, in Clipper Dome right now is Ty Lue. He's re-signed. For the most part, Clippers fans were on board with this, which, given the fan base, I was a little surprised it wasn't more split. There were people calling for Ty Lue to be fired at one point last year, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. But there was no, take aside the fact that Ty Lue is a great coach and has been with the team for so long, there was no other way this was going to go down, right? It didn't seem to me, at least, there's a world in which Ty Lue wasn't re-signing at some point.
yeah. I mean, I thought it was a elongated game of chicken because I said back there's a tweet floating, well, not floating around because I haven't made it float, but if you dig, like in the 2022 off season, some random day in July, I was like, yeah, I think Tyronn Lue is going to get an extension this time next year. And everything was set up for that to happen. Like he got through his second season with the team, a team that never had Kawhi Leonard and lost Paul George for 3 months, essentially, starting in Christmas. And that team got over 500 and competed. And that was a year after the conference finals appearance, which was the first in franchise history. So it was like, yeah, of course he's going to get extended. They're going to get Kawhi back. They're going to get Paul back. They're going to really make this push. And we're going to see just how close they are to the championship. Not only did their postseason get essentially canceled by the injuries, but before that, they played thoroughly unserious basketball for a year. And everybody wanted to talk about the dysfunction. I had never heard anyone want Tyronn Lue to not be the coach of the Clippers as far as people who like love and care about that team from a
Rational
fan
human being.
perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, I the first time I had ever noticed that people were starting to chirp about that was shortly after they signed Russ
Mm.
in February of 2023. And I remember I went to Denver and, people were, because people were over seeing Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris play together. And me, being someone who has to be around the team all the time, understood why those guys were playing. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, like, I was
Yeah.
shocked. I was shocked when, we get to Denver. This was after the double overtime 176-175 game against the Kings, right? I was shocked when they get to Denver and I'm looking at my mentions. I'm getting dinner on a Saturday night before this game in Denver, and it was like, man, they need to fire Ty Lue and hire Ime Udoka, and I was like, what is wrong with y'all?
That.
Like, people were sharing inappropriate photoshops of Marcus Morris. Like, it was very uncomfortable.
They were
So
wild. That was a wild. That was one
it
of the
was
darker times for Clippers
yeah.
fan base, I feel like.
So like the rest of the year, like I just was like in this space where I was like, who knows what and how uncomfortable is this? Because Ty Lue, like everyone kind of was like, what if Ty Lue quits? Like T. Lue
Yeah.
was super emotional when the Suns eliminated the Clippers last year, and I was like, the hell is about to happen? Is T. Lue about to like just up and leave? Like we knew that T. Lue was dealing with, some family things,
Yeah.
some things close to him. In addition to the frustration of I don't know who's going to start back to back games through this damn team. Like the way that season was going, the front office should have extended him that year. Instead, Winger goes to Washington. The guys in front office get promoted, right? And all T. Lue and the coaching staff get is you get to not be a lame duck going into the 2023-2024 season. They got that last year. T. Lue got his last year on his original deal guaranteed, just so that no one, people like me, can say, well, like they don't owe him anything after that year, right?
Totally. Yeah, that's a good call.
But shout out to T. Lue because you know what, man? Like it got worse before it got better. They lost 6 in a row, getting James Harden after running a whole training camp that was supposed to be Camp Russ. And it was Camp Russ. Like they came out, everyone, who doesn't pay attention to stuff that I write and report, they got comfortable with the idea that the Clippers were going to just keep that training camp team through the balance of the season or wait, to not to make a deal. I was like, guys, this is going to happen as soon as
Soon as this can
Philadelphia.
happen.
As soon as Philadelphia decides to make it happen, Daryl Morey gets out of his feelings like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And what happened? The trade gets made a week before they have a 4-day stretch before playing in New York. So, they failed, man, and then they succeeded. And so, Tyronn Lue, there's a lot of things that he can be better at. You can say that about every head coach in the league. Okay. Like for crying out loud, the 2 head coaches representing the NBA finalists are Joe Mazzulla, a guy that most of y'all never heard of 2 years ago, and Jason Kidd, a guy that, when he took the Dallas job, like everyone was going back to his previous head coaching spots and how crazy things got there. Like everyone can be better at the head coaching level. Every coach that has won with LeBron has literally never won without LeBron. Like, let's just be like in terms of a championship, like because apparently getting to a finals or winning games in the regular season or having the respect of the most difficult personalities in the league doesn't mean anything to these people. So, when you look at it that way, Chuck, the extension was like this should have happened. We knew it was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God it's done so we can move on to the other stuff that's probably more important.
Yeah, the uncertainty, and I thought it was, and the Clippers felt the same way too, right? As soon as Darvin Ham was let go, what did we see? An alert that the Clippers were working on a long-term extension
right before
with
Game
Ty
6
Lue. Yeah.
on man's birthday too.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, and the other part you mentioned too is there's not a lot of other coaches who can walk into this specific locker room with the amount of clout, whatever new word you want to use, that the big 4 of this Clippers team has, and come in to really like shake things up, right? This isn't a team of young, hungry guys. This is older, hungry guys who have been at the top of the entire game at one point in their careers. So you can't just bring in someone to be like, we're doing it my way now, guys.
Yeah,
like that.
like
Then we'd see
we saw
real
how that
locker
worked in
room
Milwaukee,
issues.
right? who Milwaukee hired for that?
Exactly. So Ty Lue, it's probably good. I mean, it's his hardest coaching job, maybe, but and for fans that, what do we all want as Clippers fans? Stability, some kind of continuity. We got it. We got it in other than, our players' health. We have it in probably the most important spot the Clippers could have it. And, Ballmer likes him. If people read any of the quotes about how Ty Lue feels about Ballmer and stuff like that, it's a good relationship between those guys. So
It's a great relationship, I would say.
yes.
Like they don't tolerate each other. They're not like, oh, he cool. Like, man, this dude Bomber goes to Mexico, Missouri.
Yeah. That's all you
You
need
know
to
what
know,
I'm
I
saying?
feel like. Yeah.
No
Oh,
disrespect to
man.
Mexico, Missouri, but like I've heard T. Lue talk about Mexico, Missouri. Like you gotta want to be in Mexico, Missouri,
To
like
get there.
exactly.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, any place in the United States named after another country usually isn't a place where it's like, okay, yeah, this seems like a good spot. I'm dying at Ballmer driving into Mexico, Missouri. I don't think he could fly
Well,
in.
the way T. Lue says, like I think it was I forget what hotel, but it
It's
wasn't a
the
5-star
hotel.
hotel. It wasn't a 5-star hotel
Yeah.
that Ballmer was staying at, and he was just happy to be there with Ty Lue. Like they've, and I wrote this in my piece outside of the news
Mhm.
that hit Thursday morning. Like it's an investment, right? So it's clear that the front office, you're not going to upgrade on Ty Lue. Ownership knows you're not going to upgrade on Ty Lue. Like you get a new head coach because you want to switch things up when things need to be switched up. But change for change's sake, which is something that a lot of Clippers people is like addicted to for some reason. Like the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Like,
Whew.
and so like it was just a matter of what's fair compensation. I think that's why it took so long.
Mm.
And there's a priority list. Like the Clippers have a whole lot more in this offseason. This offseason was always going to be extremely critical. We knew how critical 2024 offseason was going to be back in 2021.
Mm.
And we're here for many of the same reasons. The success of the team hasn't been there, but you can't just throw blame and say someone's got to lose their job because the team did not meet the expectations that they set for themselves. That's how you get stupid ass organizations that spin their wheels on an annual basis. Like the Clippers,
Paying
no,
multiple coaches who don't coach for your
right.
team anymore. No one wants to be in that organization.
No, you don't want to, you don't want to have an organization where it's like, okay, it's bad enough you don't have the luck factor, but the things in your control, you also are showing that you don't have a grasp of that either. And
Mm.
so, yeah, can everyone be better? Yes. Can luck be there? Sure. If the luck is there, do I think this championship window is still open? I've written that I don't think it does. The organization doesn't have to agree with me, and they are obviously they have their actions are reflecting their belief that they have the right people in place.
Mm. Yeah, and one thing that people have kind of brought up is you hear the chatter of kind of the maybe different philosophies or different aspects of the Clippers between kind of the Lawrence Frank part of the front office and the Ty Lue part, right? You mentioned the Russell Westbrook thing. There was a lot of, if you go back and read the quotes during that time from those two guys, there's a lot of different things being said. One of them, you mentioned like every coach has things to work on. I think a lot of the things that fans want to see is the front office and Ty Lue in that Lawrence Frank perspective getting a little more on the same page in terms of personnel and things like that. Because we do have question marks with the backup 5 and what is going to happen with the backup 2 kind of going into this next season.
Yeah, I mean, well, the backup 2, you're talking about a guy and Norman Powell, who I just feel like didn't really get the respect nationally that like people who saw how important the Clippers were, whether they were at their best or not. Like Norman, I thought had a fantastic season.
Mm.
I regret not writing more about him, but then again, my job ain't to cheerlead, so
Thank
it's
you
going to
for not
be
cheerleading, by the way.
yeah. Look, man, you go through my whole season of work. It's really hard to find a whole lot of fluff there. Like I got to get to a real good place to be like, all right, I'm featuring anybody.
Right.
Okay. I wrote one Kawhi Leonard is dope story all season. Okay, and I'm pretty sure his social media manager saw that, John. Like it was a game where they won in Utah in December, and
Mm.
I was like, Kawhi. He said he got a bag for this season, and then they reposted that bag. So I was really proud of that, and I never wrote about Kawhi like that ever again. So like it's hard for me to get to that place. Like I got so
Yeah.
much stuff to write about, but like Norman had an outstanding season. He was on the ball less. His off the ball efficiency was incredible, and his effort defensively was better than it had been in years. And you could see that by how well the lineup performed when Norman was in there with the other starters.
Yeah.
Okay, Norman
The Power Rangers lineup. Yeah.
exactly, and so like Norman's raw numbers are unimpressive outside of his shooting. Like we know Norm isn't really going to pass the ball, and we know that Norm is not a strong rebounder for his position, and there's not a lot of defensive plays like splash plays, but he fits. And when you got guys that fit, you keep that. Terrence Mann, he fits. Terrence Mann obviously is a player who has had to, basically get eaten alive by some of the matchups that he has.
Yes.
But the playoffs reminded you, oh wait, he's better at guarding some players than he is at guarding other players. Like he can guard a Luka Doncic more effectively than guard a Kyrie Irving. That's why I hate positionless talk, because you need all types of body types. Those body types don't have to be restricted by size. It's a matter of what can you do. Now, that very theory is what got the Clippers in trouble and why people thought that there was dysfunction between the front office and the coaching staff. The front office saw Ty Lue in 2021 have to survive a Luka Doncic absolute heater by removing Ivica Zubac from the equation entirely. Serge Ibaka, his back gave out, and we knew what the deal was there. And so Nicholas Batum essentially had to play center for the Clippers to survive that series, right? The same thing in the next series. They're like, we're not going to beat the Utah Jazz with Ivica Zubac on the floor, not because Ivica Zubac is a bad player, but because Rudy Gobert is just able to do what Rudy Gobert does, and Utah's offense is too good for that. So what do? You space the floor out with Nico at center again, make Rudy Gobert have to guard out a 5-out lineup, and the drive game was enhanced. They were able to do that even when Kawhi tore his ACL. So the front office saw that. They knew they weren't going to have Kawhi for a year, and they were like, let's try some things different with the roster. Let's punt point guards. Let's just get as many wings as possible. Isaiah Hartenstein was not an investment. He played himself into one.
Yes.
And then the team was like, you know what? We have so many wings. They've accumulated so many guys. Like, everyone looks at John Wall as the reason why Isaiah Hartenstein was there. And it's like, nah. Robert Covington, Marcus Morris, and Nicholas Batum was as much of a reason why Isaiah had to take money elsewhere as John Wall. Because, yes, the coaching staff, the stars, they're like, hey, we probably need another point guard besides Reggie Jackson. But the other part of it is you only get to have 5 basketball players on the floor at once, and they paid Marcus, Nico, and Rocco, and they believe that one of those guys could be the backup 5, especially with Kawhi there.
Yeah.
So when you build a team full of wings, you're like, let's play all the wings. And yeah, like they're going to let Isaiah take money elsewhere. That screwed the Clippers up. It screwed up those power forwards because obviously Rocco wound up sacrificing. And, the thing that I will always give Lawrence Frank in the front office credit for is whatever Lawrence Frank says he would like to do if he had carte blanche, like he does wind up collaborating with his stars. He does wind up collaborating with his coach, and he does wind up serving those guys. You want a point guard? Here's Russ. Even though
here's the most point guard we can possibly give you at this point after running through the other options.
Yeah. Lawrence made it very clear what kind of guard he would prefer playing with Kawhi and PG. Like they literally got Bones Highland and Eric Gordon on the same afternoon. Okay. And then Paul George blows that whole thing up and is like, yeah, we're not satisfied with that. Russell Westbrook's available. Let's get him. The backup center spot, like Tyronn Lue, the same guy who, benched Ivica Zubac to win multiple playoff series, was stewing about the fact that if Zoo wasn't on the floor and Kawhi wasn't available, because Kawhi makes all of those small lineups work, and Kawhi wasn't Kawhi from a health perspective or a performance perspective until January. And middle of January, the Clippers were under 500 last year. Yeah, Ty Lue, I remember walking up to him after they got Mason Plumlee and they beat the Warriors, and Ty Lue was like, we finally got a backup center. Like, we really needed that. Like,
yeah. This team, we've had to watch Moses. We watched Moses Brown play a lot of basketball for this team.
Exactly. On a two-way contract, that was like, you're on a two-way just so that we can, maximize the roster spots.
Yeah.
So when you think about all that, Chuck, it's like, yeah, they have your typical front office head coach. We're not always on the same page. Why? Because they're human and they're both, they've both done some things in this league. Yes, they both have ideas, but the credit has to be due to the fact that they understand where their weaknesses are and they address them the best that they can. This past year, it was an issue. Like, Mason, I think, was going to have a better season if he didn't, damn near tear his ACL in New York.
I watched that because I remember it was Randall, and I watched the replay of it the other day. And I was like, oh, that was It was very close to disaster for
He
Mason
got
Plumlee.
carried, Chuck. He got carried off the floor.
Yeah.
Like we saw, if it's a Zubac sprained his MCL, in the 2021 Western Conference Finals against the Suns.
Yeah.
And I thought Zoo was actually going to finish that series. It's not like Zoo had to get carried the hell off.
Yeah.
You know,
Mason was, that was close.
Mason looked like he was done for the season. I was like, okay, who else is out there? Daniel Tice had to save the damn rotation. And so Mason obviously came back and had an uneven year. Daniel is, I give him credit. He exceeded anyone's expectations, but Daniel Tice is a marginal rotation player, and you saw that by the end of the year when he didn't play.
And he's a tweener in size too, right? Like he's a
tweener,
center, but he's not a center's
yeah.
height.
He's 6'8", and he's a load up jumper, and he's over 30, and he's had knee issues. So everything you got out of Daniel Tice exceeded my expectations simply for the fact that Daniel hasn't played, real minutes in 2 years before, getting a chance with this team to fill in while Mason was recovering from the MCL. And when it comes down to it, I think both of those guys who are free agents, like the Clippers need to upgrade there. The Clippers need to upgrade on PJ Tucker. Like the Clippers knew they needed to upgrade in January and February. They tried. Everyone knew what they needed to do. And when I say everyone, like the front office I talked to, the coaching staff is like, whatever, we're just trying to get a win. Like, I don't think people realize this coaching staff, Tyronn Lue is not a meddler. Like, he ain't trying to be Bill Parcells, Dockers, cook the groceries. It's like, just, I'm going to coach who I got. Just all Ty Lue asks for is complete rosters and consistent rosters from the health perspective.
Yeah.
And you can see how that's gone. But like everyone knew, like there's a reason Danilo Gallinari, I mentioned this in the mailbag I put out earlier this week. Like they would have cut Josh Primo in February if Gallo wanted to come to the Clippers. And Gallo saw, rightfully, I would say, Gallo saw a better opportunity in Milwaukee. And Gallo did play until it was clear that Gallo was not it. So,
right.
Like if the Clippers would have traded for PJ Washington, for instance, what kind of resources would it have taken the Clippers to get to beat what Charlotte got? Charlotte got Grant Williams, a guy in his 20s, and
serviceable, but can be very good.
Yeah, like I'm not the biggest. Like I thought Dallas paying Grant Williams was asinine to start for them. I just didn't think Grant Williams is a starting caliber player. And you saw Dallas they figured that out by Christmas
pretty quickly.
Yeah, like by Christmas. I don't want to even comment on how they felt about him on a personal level. Just on the court, Grant Williams was not, he was not a starting caliber player for that team. Maybe he is for Charlotte, but we're, it's
two franchises in two different spots. Yeah,
exactly. So like, it's like, what would it have taken to get PJ Washington? Like, I don't think the Clippers would have wanted to stomach that. I don't know how well PJ would have played. Obviously, he wouldn't have made Dallas as good. But also, I mean, how valuable is a PJ Washington if a Kawhi Leonard can't stay on the floor?
It's a very good point.
How good is Dallas if Luka Doncic can't stay on the floor? So that's where I'm at with the backup situation. The front office knows what they need to do. The coaching staff, well, Tyronn Lue is going to enjoy Paris, and
they'll see Brad Turner out there. Yeah, I'm sure that'll be an insane link up.
Exactly. But I think everyone's on the same page about what needs to happen. The question is how. How, Chuck?
That was going to be my next thing. We have there are some young guys who people are excited about on the Clippers. I think, we had the Kai Jones signing, which a lot of people have used certain mental gymnastics to justify as maybe he's the next big thing for the Clippers. I think maybe. Are there any young guys you see who can maybe find some time? And we're not, I'm not saying the full backup five or something like that, but developmental minutes within the Clippers first team for these guys, because that is a tough spot on a young team with expectations like this for an older team.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard because let's start with the backup five because you do have those free agents in Mason and Daniel Tice. I believe that if you're an older team, or in this case, the oldest
Yes,
team in
yeah,
the NBA,
sure.
like I think you have to. Yeah, I mean the Clippers were the oldest team in 2021 as well, but the difference is a lot of that age was in the role players, whereas your stars were still reasonably.
Yeah,
They were
spry.
just
Yeah,
touching 30.
kissing
Now
30.
you
Yeah,
now you have so many guys who are over 30 that are at the top of the food chain, and you have to get younger from anyone else who is not an elite player. Like, so in other words, I know that the front office isn't tripping about the age of Kawhi or Paul or James, or I would say Russ, but the front office has been pretty clear about not including Russ in the same group as James, Paul, and Kawhi.
which I think makes sense. Even yeah,
Yeah, like that's just where they are. And so when you think about that, it's like, okay, they might not worry about them. I clearly do. Like, I worry. Look, I'm
yeah,
always going to worry about Kawhi's age as it relates to his health, Paul George's age as it relates to his contract, James Harden's age as it relates to the on ball role and the mileage, the crazy mileage he has had throughout his career. James hasn't had the injuries that Kawhi and Paul have had, but James also is older than those guys, and he, has a role where that is the fastest position in the league.
Mm.
And then now you got James Harden. James used to play at that speed, like the Houston Rockets and James Hart Prime. They used to be one of the fastest paced teams
Fast
in the
team,
league.
absolutely.
We're talking about a decade ago, Chuck.
Yeah.
So we're in a different era now, and so like if you are the Clippers, everybody else has to reasonably be in their prime or younger. You can't have PJ Tuckers on this team anymore. You
Yeah.
can't have Mason Plumlee's or even Daniel Tice's on this team anymore. You can barely tolerate a Norman Powell on this team anymore. And so Kai Jones has a huge opportunity ahead of him because he can be your Isaiah Hartenstein, a guy who is non-guaranteed, who has had some years and multiple teams in the league, who's had to deal with some things, but clearly has some skill sets that could, emphasis on could, be relevant. Is Kai has an opportunity. He got signed, and everyone, when he got signed, everyone was like, he can play in the playoffs. You
Yeah.
guys clearly don't listen, but that's cool, because we don't need to talk about last season. We're talking about the off season.
Yes.
We're talking about
Moving
training camp,
forward. Yeah.
and that's where we need to see Kai Jones make the biggest impression. I don't care about the highlights. I don't care about his athleticism because those are things that are, you can put those in the bank. What
Yeah.
you need to be able to rely on is feel for the game. Things that when Kai Jones was at Texas, he wasn't good at. And feel for the game is both ends of the floor. Offensively, if we're going to play you at center, and that's what the Clippers are training, they're grooming him, getting him ready for, is to be a center, not a power forward. Like,
A real
have you
five.
seen have you seen the Clippers play basketball the last 4 years? Like, I can't tell you, Chuck, how many times people are like, just put Daniel Tice at the four. It's like y'all want to win a battle and lose the war, huh?
Don't
So
even, yeah. We've seen it. Why don't we play Trez and Zoo together? Why don't we do
yeah,
that? And it's just like,
like
stop.
do y'all think that this is Charles Oakley and Patrick Ewing in the '90s Knicks? Like, what league are y'all watching?
God.
This ain't, like this ain't that league no more. That's not how the Clippers play. That's really, there ain't a lot of teams that play two non-shooting bigs, right? And so everything with Kai Jones is theoretical,
Mhm.
and you need to turn that theory into real practice and production. And the way Kai Jones does that is I'm almost certain he'll be playing summer league. He has to play basketball.
He has to play
He went
summer.
an
Yeah.
entire year where he barely was on an NBA roster at all. He played in the
Puerto
America
Rico. Yeah.
for Bahamas. He played for
Yeah.
Bahamas,
Bahamas. Yeah.
and then he got the two-way, or not the two-way, the 10-day from the Sixers. He wasn't healthy enough to last on that 10-day. They put him in Delaware. He played 2 games there. His hamstring flared up. Again, things that happen when you're not around the game and you haven't been hooping like that. And so that's why Philadelphia didn't keep him.
Yeah.
Again, he was fine there. He wasn't healthy. They needed bodies because Joel Embiid is already hurt. Robert Covington already hurt. Like they needed bodies that could play and be available. He gets to the Clippers, and the only time I saw Kai Jones, like he was with strength and conditioning, he was working with Musa Diabate, who Musa's another guy. Like Musa is
Unfortunate
going to,
injury luck last year too, which is tough.
yeah, the I don't think the injury luck with Musa was unforced errors. Like
Oh
I
yes.
don't think Musa got hurt when he broke his hand in January. I don't think that that was a thing that happened on the basketball court. I just think that Musa was had let's just say it wasn't a basketball injury. So
Okay.
like
Is he going to be in the Drew again? Because he was in the Drew
he
last
played in the
year.
Drew, but he's got bigger things to worry about right now.
He was coming off the bench
He's
in the
I don't
Drew, so
know
yeah, that's fair.
like I don't know what's going to happen with Musa because of the
Mm,
presence of Kai Jones. And so I think Musa is going to be, the Lawrence Frank said that the team has a decision to make with him. And usually when I hear stuff like that, the last time I heard something like that was Jason Preston in his summer. That means that you could see Musa going to summer league. The difference is, and just like Jason, like there are teams that were interested in Jason Preston. Like obviously Memphis picked him up for a while for their G League team, and then he finished the year with the Utah Jazz. Preston has NBA skills, but do teams think he's an NBA player? That is the jury's still out there. With Musa, like when the Clippers drafted him, the idea was first of all, Musa played power forward in college for an offense that let's just say Juwan Howard is now coaching in the NBA again. But
yeah.
like, you draft a college power forward and say, we're going to make you a center. Does that sound familiar? That's what they're doing with Kai Jones now. A guy who, Kai might think that he's got all these outside the paint abilities, and he still might, but the
Yeah.
Clippers are putting him in a certain box. And why do you put a player in a box? Normally, you want to say the game is positionless. You can do anything, but you put a player in a box. It's the same thing I told Terrence Mann last year. I know you love that positionless bullshit, but if you earn a starting job and you're playing one position that you know you're going to be in the best unit to start both halves every game, that is the best thing to have a consistent role. So they're trying to give Kai Jones a chance to have a consistent role on next year's Clippers team. And to do that, it's at the center position where he can utilize his athleticism on both ends of the floor. So I'm not looking for dunks and I'm not looking for highlights. I'm looking for, can Kai Jones set a screen? Can Kai Jones roll and make decisions out of short rolls? Can Kai Jones understand where he needs to be as a rim protector? Because Kai Jones, as tall and athletic as he is, doesn't have the great wingspan. And again, going back to Texas, he is not known for being a reliable rim protector, a
Mhm.
reliable defender. If he was, he would have played in Charlotte.
Mm,
Like,
very true.
and so those are things that need to develop over time. Like a guy as athletic as Kai Jones shouldn't, like, again, go back to Texas, his last year there, 24 blocks in 26 games for a guy with that kind of height and athleticism
And
at the
bounce.
college
Yeah.
level is like a red flag. It's like something's missing here. He
Yeah.
doesn't have the greatest wingspan and he doesn't have the greatest feel for the game, but that was 3 years ago. If he can develop a reliability there, then that's going to be huge for his chances. And that's going to be huge for the Clippers, a team that openly is trying to find wins in the margins. That's where they need to look at the center positions. That's the young guys there. You want to talk about Kobe Brown? I loved Kobe Brown coming out of Missouri for everything that he could do offensively, and he did nothing but validate that in Summer League and the G League. The Clippers' biggest issue, though, Chuck, was their defensive rebounding.
Mhm.
It's not a strength of Kobe Brown's. Like Kobe Brown, for all that he can do offensively, defensively, it's going to be a little bit tougher. We know that he got an opportunity to play, and the reason why that opportunity didn't stick is because that dude was more likely to pick up a foul than a defensive rebound. And
Yeah, it was, and that was a knock coming out of college. Was his feet
ex-
on the perimeter? He had some slow feet, which is harder to make quicker when you're going from college to the pro level.
yeah, and I think that he can defend, he can hang and survive on the perimeter. I think
Yeah,
that he works his ass off, and I think that he's going to be a smart team defender and even a guy who can make some plays, a guy who can get some steals. Like I thought Kobe showed that in summer league, the ability to shrink the floor, the ability to stay in front of guys, the ability to get in passing lanes and to make plays with his hands. I think Kobe Brown has outstanding hands, and so I think that he can survive as a four, but he's not going back to college. He's not a rim protector. He's not a great rebounder, and so I believe that the Clippers need to add a veteran power forward, a guy who can play the 4 and the 5, who can, if Kobe Brown beats that guy out, then okay, that's cool. But
That's great. Yeah.
but you also want a guy who like just can play either one of those spots. Kobe Brown's going to get an opportunity, especially if they get PJ Tucker relocated as they need to do. And offensively, I can believe in Kobe Brown. Defensively and on the glass, that's an area of weakness that I don't think Kobe Brown fills. That the veteran power forward that the Clippers needs to try and acquire, that's where they kind of need to look for. And as far as guys like Jordan Miller, because he's the other guy that Lawrence Frank specifically mentioned as young guys who have big summers to show the team something. Again, I think the team is surprised and pleased with what Jordan showed offensively, but Jordan needs to show that his defensive tools can translate a little bit better. So that's what I'll be looking for. He's got the length. He's obviously a little on the slight side, and he's got to show that he can be a game changer on that end of the floor to get out of that 2-way contract that he's in. But he's already locked in next year.
Okay, yeah. And then Brandon Boston, a fan favorite. The expectations for Brandon Boston are all over the place from Clippers fandom. I know that offensively he's very good. He had the injuries last year.
Is he though?
He has flashes, I should say.
Yeah,
he has
I would agree with that.
But that's been my thing with Brandon Boston is there hasn't been any consistency when he's had time with the first team. And obviously his lineups, he's not in lineups with, the top of the rotation or anything like that. But it's just kind of feels choppy since he's been on the team when he's with the first team.
My thing with Brandon is he works his ass off and he loves the game.
Mm-hmm.
I have been saying this for the better part of his 3 years. The ball does not find the bottom of the net consistently enough for a player who is
That's
literally
his thing, right? Yeah.
I mean, shoot, like he's taken 600 shots in the NBA, and he's a sub 40% shooter from the field. He's at 31% on his 192 career 3-point attempts. So you're seeing a player who, if he gets to his spot, he doesn't score at that spot. And then you got a guy who takes tough shots because, he's not really one to pass it. So,
and he's you mentioned slight. He's probably the skinniest guy on the team. Would be my guess.
He shares a roster with Bones Highland. So
yeah, fair. Yeah, fair. yeah, point rescinded. Yeah,
but look, man. I thought it was notable that Lawrence didn't have much to say, if anything, on either Bones or Brandon. And I think both of those guys are guys who love to see the ball released from their fingertips towards the rim more than they're going to look to pass. But both of those guys, Bones obviously has shown that he can score at the NBA level at a high rate. But if Bones, I've said this plenty of times, when Bones doesn't make shots, his whole demeanor changes.
The vibe is different. Yeah.
With Brandon, it's a matter of we just never see him shoot or score efficiently. Like he's really not good at, consistently putting the ball in the basket when that's the main thing that he works for. That's his main kind of thing. And it's been 3 years at this point. Like there's a reason Brandon was a late second round pick, even though he was a top 5 recruit coming out of a place that we all know, Sierra Canyon. Like Brandon has had a put the ball in the basket consistently issue for a long time. He shot 35.5% from the field at Kentucky, man. So like I believe there is something there with Brandon, but like he's at a point where you got to look at Brandon Boston versus Amir Coffey. And Brandon has to do 2 things. Number one, he's got to get and stay healthy. Brandon was going to have every opportunity ahead of Amir to be a rotation player as soon as this year. Unfortunately, he had the quadriceps tendinopathy in Hawaii. He only, he got into that first preseason game in the first quarter. That's how highly he was going to get a chance to really get a chance to run. Like he had a great summer. They held him out of summer league because they thought that highly of him. Unfortunately, he had a setback with that quad, and he never got healthy until December. And by December, it's like Brandon's too old to be going to the G League getting these reps. That's
Right.
Kobe Brown. That was Joshua Primo. That was all, Jordan Miller. Those guys had to get those reps. They're like, nah, Brandon, you got to be with the team. And Brandon just rarely got an opportunity to play. And so I believe Brandon can be a better player when he's playing with the best guys. But to play with the best guys, that ball has to find the bottom of the net. Amir Coffey kept his spot because Amir Coffey did an outstanding job of making shots in his role. Brandon just has never shown the ability to do that at a consistent level, and he's running out of time. Like he's going to be a restricted free agent. If he gets an opportunity this time around, Brandon's got to look at Amir Coffey, a guy who, shout out to Amir, but Amir is literally going to be 27 years old this summer, and like Amir was not good enough to stay on the floor this postseason. When Amir is stretched as a guy who gets extended minutes in a rotation. If
Yeah.
you're Brandon Boston Jr., you got to beat that guy out. And again, we got to see how the team navigates his free agency. But I don't look at Brandon as a guy who is
He's
going to
not on that
command.
list of guys who
Yeah,
can.
like he's not a guy who, like, if a team overpays because they really want Brandon Boston Jr. in restricted free agency, like yeah,
Go
the
for
Clippers
it.
will say, good luck, and they'll move on.
Yeah.
And so like that's Brandon. When it comes to Bones, everything with Bones is going to come down to what happens with Russ and
Yeah.
James to an extension. But I just feel like Bones is a shooting guard in a point guard's body. And so if you look at why Josh Primo was signed, and Josh Primo, we can talk, the off court stuff is the off court stuff, and
Hmm.
the development of Josh Primo from just a therapeutic, psychological,
Yeah.
whatever. Same with Kai Jones.
Yeah.
Lawrence is very open about this. It's like the development plan for him there, as much as the basketball development plan, sure, that was relevant. But as far as the player, they wanted a Josh Primo type because it was the same thing San Antonio, because he was overdrafted. Primo should have never been
Yeah.
a lottery pick.
He was
Like
drafted way
it
too
was
high.
insane that he was a lottery pick. But he was a lottery pick, and San Antonio tried to have him be a point guard, even though he had not shown that he was that kind of player at any point previous to his pro career starting. The Clippers try to pick that up. Like they try to, what does Lawrence Frank says he wants? He wants big guards who can be as effective on the ball as they are off the ball. We saw it
Can
with Luke
shoot.
Kennard.
Yeah.
We saw it with Eric Gordon. We saw it with Landry Shamet, right? Like, so what do you expect me to say about this draft? They're not looking for another Brandon Boston or a Bones Highland. I do think they're looking for another Josh Primo.
Mm.
And that's where, if you look at development, this team does not need more young bigs to develop. You have Kobe
Please.
Brown, and now you have both Kai Jones and Musa Diabate on the same roster. And I don't know if both of those guys make it to or through training camp.
Mhm.
There's enough bigs to develop, if you will. Jordan Miller, you just used a second round pick on him as a wing who is not a natural ball in hand guy, even though he's showing flashes that he could be that guy. 3 years ago, you picked three guards, in effect, three guys who were scorers in Keon Johnson, again, a big guard who has no business being trained as a point guard, but the Clippers were trying to talk themselves into having him be like a point guard. That was Keon Johnson. People are going to forget about Keon because he didn't last 1 year. But you have to remember who the Clippers look at and wind up selecting with their picks. They looked at Keon, who was a hyper athlete who needed to learn how to play basketball. Preston, who was literally the exact opposite of Keon in every way. And Brandon, a long young kid who had high school pedigree, who you just were like, let's see what there is there. That was 3 years ago. Brandon's restricted, and Jason and Keon are long gone. They need to replenish the guard situation, because even if James and Russ come back, you're talking about 2 point guards who are in their mid 30s at a position that we've already established is full of young, fast talent. Okay. I look at the Clippers not to draft a point guard sized player, but to draft a guy who you could talk into playing the 1 or the 2. That's going to be the biggest puzzle piece of who the Clippers going to draft next month.
And it's difficult with the draft too, because they're drafting in a spot where everybody is an option. You know what I mean? It's not like they're in the top 5 or you're at the 46th pick where the talent pool is wide-ish and the amount of guys you can take is astronomical.
Yeah, you're not drafting for need.
Yeah.
At the middle of the second round.
Yeah.
You just want what Lawrence says, pick the player that can make an impact, that can make the team develop and contribute in a short manner of time. So even now, with me saying I think it's going to be a big guard that they look for, that doesn't mean that if some big who is good and drops, this year's Gigi Jackson, for instance, if that player is available and it's like, oh, he fits and he's good and he might win a job. He might be, better than the bigs. If that player is there at 46, you're just like, yeah, you're going to pick him because he's better than whatever project guard might be there.
Yeah.
So you consider every position, but I'm planting a flag now that I expect a big guard to be the priority. Especially the other factor is Xavier Moon is not 2A eligible. And at Xavier Moon's age, not that Xavier Moon is an old person on earth, but as a player on that kind of a, roster spot, I think that Xavier is probably not going to be a player that the team gives serious consideration to for a roster spot. If he was, he would have already had one, because Xavier deserved a spot over someone like Joshua Primo.
Absolutely.
For instance, there's a reason why Xavier Moon was with the team and Josh Primo, before he messed his ankle up, was still not with the team, right?
Yeah.
But maybe you invite him and say, hey, can you win a job just in case?
Can you
But
compete?
the reality is they need to replenish the guard developmental spot. And if they don't draft a guy, maybe that's a priority undrafted guy as well.
You briefly mentioned the Paul George and Harden returns for this team. We got a couple more minutes left. At this point, it feels inevitable that, and I mean, I could be wrong, but it just feels like there's this weird situation where the Clippers are kind of like negotiating against themselves, while Paul George has this leverage of, well, I could get a max from so-and-so. Are we just kind of inching towards the Clip? Do you feel that we're just kind of inching towards the Clippers giving Paul George a max, the 4 years?
I'm not there yet, man.
Okay.
I'm really not, because I think what needs to happen is this: the Clippers can pay Paul George more money than anybody else. However, the Clippers have let it be known that from a year's and average, annual salary standpoint, they're not willing to go there. And so Paul's going to be like, all right, well, y'all are going to be on the same level as everybody else, maybe less. Let's see what these other teams are really talking about.
Okay.
If I'm Paul George, I'm opting out and I'm getting all these dinners, man. I'm going to Philly.
Yeah.
Philly got some. Look, I'm from Philly. You're going to get some good cuisine there.
Absolutely.
I'm going to Orlando. I was just in Orlando. I'm sure Orlando got some good food down there. I'm going to New York.
Take a trip. I was going to say, you got New York City.
I'm eating good, man. I'm opting out, and I'm going to see who by late June, early July is really serious about the kind of money that they would commit to a player who's played 14 NBA seasons already and is looking for a reason to leave everything behind in LA to go to be cold on purpose. And I just am like, if I'm Paul, I'm going to see who blinks, because all these teams can talk now and try and disintegrate a relationship that has been formed over 5 years at least, right? They can try and do that. And it's easy to lie in May and June, but it's hard to do it when you're sitting across from the dinner table and trying to figure out who's going to take the check, And so let me tell you how these things work. We hear a lot of noise and a lot of BS until it come real time. We thought James Harden was going back to Houston, and then Houston
Yeah.
hired Ime Udoka, and that was the wrong coach to be trying to have a reunion with James Harden.
Yeah.
So you never know when the bag that you thought you was going to get based off of what some reporter was willing to print 4 months ago disintegrates when the time comes to really make your decision. So I expect Paul George, and I think the Clippers kind of expect Paul George to opt out and
Absolutely.
test this thing. But
Okay.
I'm going to see who, when it really comes down to it, is really trying to give Paul George a blank check to leave everything behind,
Everything.
because it will hurt Paul if he's got to leave, man. He got family here, new family, blood family. He really cares about the dudes that he's been playing with, cares about Kawhi. The relationship with him and Ty Lue. Ty Lue coaches Paul hard, but
Mhm.
Paul has always taken to that positively. The relationship there is not going to be why Paul leaves. Like, I look at all the factors, and Paul knows that, like, maybe the championship window, Law Murray said that shit's closed, but like, and I know Paul is really thinking hard about, hey, if I go somewhere else, it's going to be younger teammates, healthier teammates, guys who, might maximize in the spring where he hasn't had a chance to do that with Kawhi. I see all that. But let's see what it really look like, because it ain't, like I keep saying, Chuck, the grass ain't always green on the other side. And PG's already been called out by high level players for quote unquote running from the grind, right? Like, you gonna go to Joel Embiid's team? I ain't never seen Joel Embiid healthy in the playoffs.
Right.
You gonna go to New York? Like,
We
Julius
just saw what
Randle.
happened to them in the playoffs.
I ain't never seen Julius Randle healthy in the
And
playoffs.
Tibbs is the coach. Tibbs is
Tibbs
going to
is a
coach
coach.
Paul George.
Oh, you gonna play 40 minutes?
Yeah.
You gonna play
Back to
40 minutes
backs.
on MLK Day, bro? Like, you gonna go to Orlando? Them just got their first taste. Like, okay, you gonna go there and be the guy. Like, I think Orlando makes the most sense if you're going to leave. Like, good
Yeah.
weather, no taxes, a coach that ain't embarrassed himself yet. Uh, like,
Young star,
big
big young
big
wing.
dudes,
Like,
right? Like,
yeah.
you ain't got to worry about playing the 3 or the 4 down there. You want
Hmm.
to play the 2? Go
Go
ahead,
for
play
it,
the 2.
man. Yeah.
Like Jalen Suggs, he'll chase and hit anybody you want down there. You know what I'm saying? That's the threat. And again, it comes down to, bro, do you want to go to Orlando? You want to go to Orlando? You gonna say goodbye and you gonna have to come back and you gonna get a 30-second tribute video
Yeah.
and Into It Dome, bro. So, like, Chuck, you're gonna have to clip all this off because it's real talk, though. It's real talk. So I think that's why the Clippers are like, they're gonna courteously, gently, but directly be like, Paul, if you opt out, we gonna be here, bro.
Yeah.
We gonna
That's
be
all they
here with
can
the
do.
same offer that's been here, and it's gonna be up to you to decide how much it really means to you to take that last big bag somewhere else, just so you can say that you maxed.
I mean, that's a fantastic breakdown of it. And now, James Harden. Is there a team? I was rattling this around. Is there a team that can offer James Harden enough money and also a chance at winning a ring than the Clippers can? Because it doesn't, maybe Orlando, but it doesn't, you know what I mean? It feels like this, he should stay, is what I'm kind of like. 3 for 110, 3 for 120. Line it up with Kawhi's contract. I don't know. Maybe it seems too easy in my head because I've been thinking of the Paul George negotiations.
Kevin Garnett, when you wiggle your way out, you only got 1 or 2 wiggles. You ain't got infinite wiggles. I'm just gonna stand on business with that because James don't. Everything just made sense for James. Unlike Paul, James has been through this time and time
50
again over
times.
the
Yeah.
last 4 years, man. He was with the Rockets in 2020, the Nets in 2021, the Sixers by 2022, and then he opted out and did the sacrifice, and that cost Sixers money, and that obviously played a role in how the last summer went in 2023. He's literally on his fourth team in 5 years. Really, don't even need
Damn.
five. He started the year in Houston, even though he
Yeah.
won it out to
Right.
begin that
Yeah.
year. So I just don't think James wants to keep doing this. Like, I got to be around James quite a bit, even though, again, I don't show nobody favoritism. You'll never, like, again, y'all see me. Y'all see me, right? Y'all see me on social media. I clearly am the opposite of an agenda writer. Okay. Like, I'll ask anybody anything and I won't, yeah, like, I don't hit peace, but I also
Yeah.
ain't here to
You
talk
describe
about,
what's happening. You're asking
I'll
questions about
let you
what's
know.
happening.
I'll let you know. So, like, it's not like, James is going to be hitting me up after the pod. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? However, I really got to be around James on and off the floor multiple times. Like, he was comfortable and happy with how he was moving. And he and Ty Lue, like, considering James literally has head coaches that go on TV talking about how much they didn't like coaching James Harden. You know what I'm saying? Like, James and Ty Lue got along very well. And Ty Lue relied on James more than Ty Lue even relied on Kawhi or P.
Mm,
Like, this
yeah.
dude James was playing 40 minutes in the damn playoffs and was playing well.
Yeah. Him and Zoo
James
were playing great.
James didn't play poorly in the playoffs until Game 5, by my estimation. Game 5, James was terrible. But even Game 6, James had 13 assists while his co-star wasn't shooting the ball or taking
Right.
the bull by his horns. And I don't even put that on Paul George. Like, Paul, unless Paul said that PJ Tucker should start Game 6, like, that didn't happen. And so, like, I just feel like I'm not really looking at realistic ways where James doesn't stay with the Clippers. Like, the
Totally.
relationship was there. Balmer, Balmer knows what it is. Like, he knows what it is. He's not even really a factor here. The front office loves James. Like, James was the ideal guy to bring to the team to play point guard when they already had a starting point guard, bro. Okay. And then you saw how it was for everybody else. Like, there's conversation about, James and P's connection, but James made things pretty easy on Kawhi. And so the means of getting James meant that you were short at the wing, the big forward position, and they never fixed that. And that was part of the Harden tax, but that's not James Harden's fault. I thought the
Right.
trade was good. You gave up a lot to get him. Everyone knows what it is. He's from here. He's got roots here. He's old. He says he wants to retire here. There's really no reason for that not to happen. He hasn't been around long enough to say, "Oh, I wonder if this would." No, like, he didn't have a training camp with the Clippers.
Right.
The Clippers can legitimately go into next season and say, you know what? We're going to be 5 games better because we're not going to have a 6-game losing streak trying to integrate a new point guard in November, bro.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you can reasonably go in the next season saying. If you can say you can bring James back, you can bring Paul back, and you can find the dude who has the Kawhi Leonard knee voodoo doll. Like, do all that shit, and you can reasonably
And we're
say,
good.
hey, we can be better. We can at least be at the top 4 in the West again. And then it always comes down to the health at that point. I'm not looking at James leaving the Clippers. It just makes too much sense for them to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to hear that. That's kind of where my head was at. Law, that about wraps things up. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking Clippers. We love it. We usually have some kind of chip and dip combination because we are Clips and Dip. I didn't want to subject you to just watching me one-on-one eat chips and dip. Do you have any advice, insights, or thoughts about chip dip that a favorite dip perhaps that you would like to pass on to our listeners?
Absolutely, nah, not. I just say, make sure you have a good glass of water or something, man. Ain't nobody trying to choke on that stuff. So,
That's good
I'm not.
advice.
Yeah, I'm not a dip person. I'm barely a chip person, but
Okay.
pod is dope though. So I appreciate y'all having me.
We appreciate it. Please go ahead, plug anything you would like to plug, any advice, anywhere to find you, so these people can become better Clippers fans.
Yeah, so Chuck and I was talking about the finals before I got on, and we ain't talked about that. I know y'all want to see 2 forwards at the 3 and the 4 spot, and have a sign that is going to work. Then it's clear what team y'all should be hoping gets through this thing. I think the Boston Celtics can be inspiring. to the Clippers. So I'm going to just put that out there, and I'm also going to shout out all my guys at the Athletic covering the finals now. Tim Cato, who I hope that y'all saw Tim Cato. He and I have a great connection every time it's Mavericks Clippers. So shout out to him. I'm excited that he's going to get to cover this. And then y'all saw 2 years ago this when the Celtics made it to the finals. Jared Weiss and Jay King, they've been here before. So I'm sure we got our national writers as well, and we have a great news desk. And our outlet really, we ain't here to blog, man. We ain't here to wait for someone to say something for us to write something or someone's IG story to be like, someone broke their silence on this shit. It's like those dudes are really trying to put some different stuff out there. So support them, support me. I'm still writing, and we got a whole lot going on the month of June.
There we go. We thank you so much. Check out The Athletic. Check out all of Law's work. The Tripod is going to be back next week, assuming Will and Adam are okay and healthy. I think they are. You can find us on YouTube over at youtube.com/@ClippersPodcast. You can find us on Twitter @ClippersPod. And if you would like to argue with me, you can find me on Twitter @ChuckMockler, although I may mute you. Thank you for hanging out. And as always, let's go Clips.